Welcome to the Airmen Helping Airmen Podcast. I'm your host, Khalith Wright, CEO, Air Force Aid Society. Join me as we chat with extraordinary guests, share stories, and learn how amazing people are making a difference in the lives of so many Air Force and Space Force families.
Hello and welcome to the Airmen Helping Airmen Podcast. I'm John Farrell, the Chief Operating Officer of the Air Force Aid Society. And on the line, I have Cheryl Mason, who is our guest today. In a moment, we'll give Cheryl the opportunity to say a few words. But let me tell you a little bit about her background. She has a very impressive resume. Of course, I'll provide at the end all the LinkedIn and social media profiles that she has. But she's a senior executive catalyst and advocate for veterans, military spouses, and military family and caregivers. She's a renowned public speaker who has served as the executive director for veteran and military spouse talent engagement at the United States Department of Veterans Affairs, something near and dear to anyone who ever wore a uniform's heart. She's done that relatively new in the role since August 2022. So we'll talk a little bit about why she changed and did different things. Prior to that, she was chairman of the Board of Appeals from 2017 to 2022. Also served as the Deputy Vice Chairman, Board of Veterans Appeals 2016 to 2017, and the Chief Veterans Law Judge, Board of Veterans 2006 to 2016. As you can tell, she's obviously an attorney and a judge. A Veterans Law Judge, Board of Veterans Appeals for 2003 to 2006. Prior to working for the Veterans Administration, she served as an attorney with the Federal Labor Relations Authority as a DoD civilian for the Air Force, near and dear to all of our hearts. Serving at a great location, Ramstein Air Base, Germany, and as an instructor on the side for Central Texas College while serving in Germany. She is the spouse of an Air Force veteran, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force retired, and the daughter of a WW2 Navy veteran. She is a key leader in the Military Spouse Employment Initiative, working and sharing best practices across the globe to ensure military readiness, as well as assisting and transitioning veterans. She hails from Portsmouth, Ohio, and she began her education with a BA in distinction with poli-sci psychology at Ohio Northern University, and obviously went on to get her JD at Creighton University School. She started her practice in Omaha, Nebraska, and she's been selected for so many awards it would take me 30 minutes just to name all of those. But obviously, as you can tell, she's had an extremely impressive career. Cheryl, tell us where you are today and how life's treating you.
So, today I'm coming to you from the wonderful state of North Carolina. I'm just a little west of Fort Bragg in the Pinehurst community. We're here to begin the Christmas holidays, so we have a house down here, and I'm decorating. So I'm operating from down here today. And but last week I was in DC, so I go back and forth to spend quite a bit of time in DC. And we call this the escape house.
And being from Washington, D.C., I don't blame you. I got to tell you, I love my job and I love the people that are on this phone, but I will not miss when I retire and we move down south. I'll tell you that, growing up with the traffic here. So I shared in the introduction that you were brand new to this role, just starting a few months ago. So tell us about the role and why you chose to change your career path in that part of the arena.
Well, it kind of just, this is what happens when you're in a political position. The political position comes to an end. My term was initially as chairman, was a 6-year term. And, the administration and the president were looking really hard at the commitment to veteran and military spouse employment. Both from the White House level, but also in VA. I mean, VA is about taking care of our veterans and their families. And, one of the ways we can do that is make sure we're hiring people who understand that system. And so, especially with PACT Act coming on board, the secretary asked if I would consider transitioning out of the chairman's role a little bit early to really set up this office and get it on its feet. Given my background in veteran and transitioning veterans and military spouse employment, and the fact that I was able to carve a career as a military spouse, And so I thought about it. It made sense. I've been, I was at the board for 28 years, back and forth as an attorney and judge, as you mentioned, And then, it was really the honor of a lifetime to be selected for a political position and serve as chairman for that organization as the first woman and military spouse to do so. But it was time to start transitioning, and we really needed to make, especially with PACT Act coming on board, we really needed to make an effort to increase and enhance our hiring. And so I agreed to step out of the position in August and step in over here. They had found a nominee for the chairman position, and so it worked. And so here I am.
Well, that's fantastic. So can you explain, to begin the conversation, what are some of the key priorities the Department of Veterans Affairs are facing right now? What do you think, in turn, are their biggest challenges as a result of that?
Well, since I'm no longer a principal, that's really kind of beyond my beyond my repertoire, but I can speak a little bit. I think the biggest thing right now for us is PACT Act. PACT Act is going to have and is having a huge impact, bringing lots of opportunities and benefits for veterans as well as services.
Cheryl, would you do me a favor, explain what that acronym is for everyone in our audience?
Sure, if I can remember all of it. Basically, PACT Act is about serving. When you served in Afghanistan or Iraq and you were exposed to chemical exposures, whether fires, other things. And so I would have to go look up the name. I don't have the name.
I just want them to understand what it means.
Yeah. But PACT Act is really about the exposures, the chemical exposures that our veterans were exposed to serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, and in other capacities supporting that. And it basically results in several disabilities, primarily around the respiratory system. And so, we've been dealing with this, and this is really something for VA. It's a lesson learned from our previous history with Agent Orange. We that took a while to get all the Agent Orange disabilities things connected, and there's some that are still out there that we're still looking at. And so this was really VA being proactive with the legislative branch and looking at these opportunities for benefits. So, this major impact and for veterans and to file for these benefits for exposure to chemicals and burn pits and things like that will enable them to get services for those. But also, when a veteran files for benefits, it's extremely important that they understand that they are entitled to those benefits because they served. They're not taking away benefits from anybody else. They're entitled to those. And so that's really important for our veterans and their families to understand. The other thing that's really important is to understand that those benefits can help care for, through the services and the compensation, can help care for the veterans as the veterans age. Because, transition, and as you age, things change, and we want to make sure that we're taking care of our veterans and providing all the benefits and services that they're entitled to. So thinking about, and applying for those benefits is important. But on the other side of that, VA has to be ready to serve. And so in order to serve those veterans, we have to make sure that we have the staff on board. Now, VA is a large agency. We are the second largest federal agency with 440,000 employees and growing. But we have openings in pretty much everywhere in the department, from accountants to lawyers to claims to doctors to nurses to IT. VA really is far-reaching. And in order to ensure that we're delivering those benefits and services to our veterans, we have to make sure we have the staffing. And so that's why we're really looking for talent. We're looking for the strongest talent we can find. And personally, I believe, and the Secretary believes, that military spouses and veterans and family members, caregivers, and survivors are that talent. And I know personally many veterans and military spouses who have very strong backgrounds in all the areas that VA serves. And we want to encourage them and recruit them to come to VA to serve. We really view it as heroes serving heroes, because that's what VA is about. And who best to serve those heroes than those heroes themselves?
Well said, and that'll be a perfect segue to the topic that we're going to go to. But let me just share personally that I really appreciate what you're saying, what you did. My dad was a flyer in the United States Air Force, and he was in Vietnam. And he didn't know it until he was in his 80s. He lived to 2 months shy of 90, but in his 80s, the Agent Orange thing became an issue, and he had severe Parkinson's as a result of it. So thank God the Veterans Administration stepped forward, took care of him, and now subsequently he's taking care of my mother because of it. So thank you very much personally for what you do. And let's move on to the topic at hand, which you just mentioned. So in this new role, and you mentioned it a little bit, I think it's imperative that we hire a diverse range of military, veteran, women, and family members into the VA. And you kind of talked a little bit about that. So what's some of your strategies, or what things do you have in mind to invoke that and make that happen?
Well, we already have veterans preference. So if a veteran is service connected 30% or more, they're entitled to veterans preference for the positions they apply for. So we have that. We also have military spouse hiring authority, which means if a military spouse is, military spouse married to active duty military can apply and be considered if they're qualified for any position that the VA offers. So those two are pretty strong. Now we have other, of course, hiring authorities. We have student recent grad hiring authorities. We have internship hiring authorities. We have a variety of different levels of hiring authorities for veterans in other ways. So we're looking to really try to expand and help the department, our colleagues across the department, both the HR specialists and the hiring managers, particularly hiring managers, understand these authorities. So one of the areas is that when hiring managers are looking to hire, sometimes people get tunnel vision, especially around veterans preference or military spouse authority. And they don't think about the fact that, you might have a veteran who doesn't have the veterans preference level, right, but is a student. Okay, so we could bring them in through a recent grad program. We could bring them in through an internship. We can even that's the other thing. We have a lot of direct hire authority right now. Direct hire authority means we can hire the best qualified person for the job. And we want veterans and spouses and family members to apply. Now, those preferences and authorities don't apply here, but if you have awareness of what you're looking for, and if that person identifies as a veteran or a military spouse, I think that's something we should be looking for. We need to be intentional about our hiring. And so that's one of the strategy is helping people understand, first and foremost, the hiring authorities they do have, how to use those to fill those positions. And then to be intentional in some of the other areas, we want to make sure that we're bringing in the right talent to do the job and to meet those, to serve those veterans. And again, I can't say it enough, family members and spouses and caregivers and survivors and veterans themselves really bring that understanding of what it's like to serve. I know this personally because I brought it definitely to my jobs, all of my jobs. But, at the board as chairman and even in prior positions, I worked very closely with, and I worked to hire, because I was intentional about it, spouses and veterans, because they understood, they served right alongside. And then they're a veteran, they served, and they understand what they're looking at in the claims files and the appeals. And that happens across the department. There's an understanding, there's a familiarity. It's a family, it's comfort, we understand. And so that's really what we're trying to drive and teach. So our mission really in the Veteran and Military Spouse Talent Engagement Program is to market and outreach to make sure people know we're here, and to let us know about job opportunities or job fairs. So VA can come and participate and recruit and hire, but also to make sure that the rest of the department is aware about those hiring fairs, use our partnerships, and then to use those skills to train across the department, and also to help transitioning veterans, military spouses, family members to how to apply, how to work through that system, or to connect them with our partners who provide that service, who can help them strengthen their resume, or who can advise them, a little bit more about what they should be looking at. So we don't have all the hiring authorities for like that. We don't have hiring authorities for veteran spouses. We don't have hiring authorities for caregivers. We don't have hiring authorities for family members, but we have a lot of different hiring authorities that can be used to hire those people. And so again, it's about being intentional and being clear about what are we looking for? Who are we looking for? And let's think about, what we want in the member of our team to serve who we serve.
Well said. I mean, we have that common core of experience, so why not use it? I think it's just so important. So prior to this role, and I mentioned this as part of your bio, you were a first. You were the first woman and first military spouse to serve as the CEO of the Board of Veterans Appeals. So obviously, you have to be proud of that, but separating that, what did you find was where you were most successful in those 4 years that you served? And I'm sure that your parents and everybody else was so proud that this happened, that you broke the glass ceiling. So good on you, but share a little bit of that experience and what that meant to you.
So I served as chairman, and a lot of people are like, is it chairwoman? I'm like, no, the law says chairman. I was the chairman. And, I consider that a gender neutral term. And my mother actually passed shortly after I took on the role. And she was a World War II spouse, and a government teacher. So she was quite proud
I'm sure.
of me. And, that role was just, like I said, it was the honor of a lifetime to serve. I never saw that one coming. When they knocked my door and asked me to serve, I was like, sure, if I can get through Senate confirmation. And I not only got through Senate confirmation, I made it through multiple hearings. I almost served almost 5 years in the position. So where I looked for change, because I had been at the board in a variety of roles, and I had served as both an attorney and a judge, and then previously as an executive assistant overseas, I really brought a different perspective to the position of chairman that I think that we had seen in a political chairman. I was the fourth political chairman, as you said, the first woman, the first military spouse. And the board had not had a chairman for 7 years when I stepped in. And it showed.
Sure.
There were a series of caretakers, but very different leaders throughout that time. And when you don't have a leader and a person to set the vision and direction, you can basically ensue chaos. So that's what happened. So one of the things I knew stepping in, that I really had to set the vision and direction of where we were going, but I really had to ensure that I was building the morale and supporting the board, because I had been there. I was right next to them. They were my colleagues and friends that I had worked for many years with. So the first thing I did was really launch what we called Board 2.0 at the time, and it was really a remake that every decision makes a difference, and everything we do at the board makes a difference to every veteran. So we did a couple of different things. When I took over, we were doing about 50,000, 55,000 decisions a year. That was not enough. We had a pretty large staff, and we were hiring, but we hadn't really hired to the level we needed to. So we did people, process, technology is what we did. We brought in the people. We hired, we trained, we improved the technology. I was really, fortunate to find a member of the staff who had IT background, who was able to redesign our decision template, and we increased productivity by 40% in the first year.
Impressive.
And then I streamlined some processes while we were looking at that. And then, at the same time, we were dropping appeals modernization. So I also launched appeals modernization as well as was handling the legacy cases. So the first year, we did 85,000 decisions, and it just continued to go up. And so we finished off my last 4 years chairman. We did over 100,000. I believe this year they finished somewhere around 95 or 96,000. This year we really balanced the hearings because we also we used the technology to launch virtual telehearings. And that was something that was in my hip pocket when I stepped into the role in one of the first meetings I had. And we launched it actually right as COVID hit. And it completely blew apart how the board operated because it enabled us to not be confined to the physical locations of holding hearings at the regional office or at the board facilities. And we could offer virtual telehearings on your phone or on your laptop from wherever the veteran wanted to be. And right. I really used my background as a judge, traveling for many years and watching the veterans travel across the states to come to hearings and see the impact on their health, the difficulty it was traveling, but also the stress it put the veterans under. And so I really wanted to make sure that we were doing something that was veteran-centric and veteran-focused. And so that was my focus of the virtual telehearing. The added benefit is it enabled the staff, along with the other technology we had launched, to be able to work from anywhere. So it opened up our recruitment opportunities. And so we added almost 70 judges over 4 years' time because we were able to recruit across and have them work from remote locations, which offered different diverse backgrounds and skill sets than we had seen before. One of my goals at the board was to ensure that the board of judges and our staff reflected those we serve in diversity as well as understanding. We had lost several veterans who had retired from the staff, and I felt it was really important that we bring veterans and military spouses back into those roles where we could. I believe that the military is probably the most diverse organization on the planet, and that means the families are diverse, and you need that diversity to not only understand where our veterans and what their backgrounds and experiences are and what they bring to their claims and appeals and everything else, our services, but you need to have somebody who understands that. And so you have people come from like circumstances. So those were a couple things I did. I doubled the number of hearings in 5 years, and I doubled the number of decisions out the door. We increased the technology, and overall, I think I increased the morale. Our scores were good. So I was very proud of my work at the board. And like I said, it was a capstone. I am a little bit of a change agent, so that's just how I roll.
Well, that's great, Cheryl. And, as I was sitting here thinking, and we'll talk a little about how your military spouse experience related. Do you happen to know a gentleman named Major General retired Judge Bill Mormon?
I do.
Yeah, I don't know if you realize this, but he was our president of the board up until 2 years ago and was the president for many years. So we really appreciate what Judge Mormon did for us. I figured once I read your bio that you would know him. He's a good man.
Yes, Judge Mormon and I actually worked together at VA before he went to the court. So
right, I figured you would know him. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about, and I think you have an edge in this arena because you are married to a lieutenant colonel who served in the United States Air Force. So as you probably know, we are the official charity of the United States Air Force and now the United States Space Force as well. And one of the things that we focus in under our community programs is military spouse-centric endeavors is the best way to put it. So what I'm curious to know is, first of all, based on your experience of serving with your husband, are you familiar with spouses that received our assistance? Would be the first part of the question. If so, what type of assistance? And how can we encourage military spouses to not be proud enough to come forward and ask for help if need be?
So I'm aware of you all and all the work you have done. I don't know that I know anyone who received assistance from you directly. We served my husband was on active duty from 87 until 2000, and then he went reserve and retired in 2007.
I see.
So I don't know if I know anybody who directly, but I'm aware of what you do, and I just can't thank you enough for everything you do, because it means so much. And I do think that military spouses, this is one of the areas that military spouses can be a challenge in. We think we have to do everything quietly and sit in the background and just do it. And it makes us stronger, but it also means we don't reach out when we need the help we need. And so one of the things I do when I speak is I do encourage our spouses, one, first and foremost, identify as a military spouse and look for those organizations who can provide support and aid, because that's what they're there to do. And that's what the mission is. And so, often you guys are on my list of places that I share, because I just don't think people realize what all you do.
Good. We appreciate that. And please continue to spread the word. And one program that we focus on is the spouse employment program. And what's great about that one is it's designed for folks who are not ready or don't want to attend college, but they want immediate portability skills that they can work, whether they're in Thule, Greenland, or Minot, or Washington, D.C.
Or Cannon Air Force Base.
That's exactly right. Cannon. Woo. Yes. My wife was stationed at Cannon, and I'm glad I wasn't. I'll put it that way. But yeah, I mean, it can be a difficult environment. Some of the things we do is we do blood bank, certified nursing assistants, fitness trainers, a little bit of HR, pharmacy technicians. So please continue to spread the word. We're looking at our budget now for increasing that for this next year. So I really appreciate you getting the word out on the street for us. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, actually, you guys came up recently on my trip to Cannon. I was in Cannon at the end of, I've got my months run together. I think it was the end of October, beginning of November. And, one of the spouses was reentering the job, was thinking about reentering. And she was a little reluctant. She was reticent because she was like, look, I've been raising kids for 20 years. I don't know. And I told her, I said, look, here's the agencies, but depending on what you want to do, you might want to go over and look at this group right here, because of what they're offering and where you are right now, because they might have something here in the area that you could use to support the community that would, kind of get your feet back on the track, before you guys PCS.
Right. And a couple other tidbits that I would ask you to share as well. We are the only sister charity, and where our offices are within 4.5 miles, we have all of our sister societies: Army Emergency Relief, Coast Guard Mutual Aid Society, American Red Cross, Navy Marine Corps Relief. All of us are there. We are the only one that takes care of the total force for emergency assistance. And when I say that, I mean active duty guard, reserve, widow or widower, or retiree, regardless of status. So you happen to mention your husband. I had some desert time, just like I'm sure he may have. And when I looked at the woman and man in front of me wearing that Air Force uniform, I never knew whether they were active duty guard or reserve, nor cared. But for whatever reason, prior to new leadership, and I'll talk about that here in a moment, we decided that they had to be on Title 10 orders, a certain amount of days and all that. So we broke new ground a couple of years ago. You probably know, but for 78 years, the CEO was either a 1, 2, 3, or 4-star general. And we're blessed to have the former Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. And when he came in, he said, look, we're going to shake things up a little bit, kind of like what you talked about being a change agent. We probably may tick a few people off, but that's okay. And we're going to go and look underneath the microscope at the services that we do. He also asked us to be more philanthropic. We used to have an 80-20 portfolio, which meant 80%, 0% interest loans, 20% grants. He said, John, let's move the needle a little bit. And now we're at 60-40 to be exact. Last year, we were 42.35% were grants.
That's fantastic.
And that was the most philanthropic in the history of the 80 years. And it beats all the other sister services. So I had to give that rah-rah as part of this discussion.
No, that's important. You got to do that rah-rah. Yeah. I'm a firm believer in, I think it was Albert Einstein. I always have to go check the quote, is, the things that if you keep doing things the same way, that's called insanity. And so sometimes you have to change it up a little bit to change, to do things differently. And the world around us is changing. And so we do have to do things differently because it's not going to be the same. And if we want to continue to impact, because that's what we're here to do, then we have to look at different ways to do it.
So in our remaining time, I have time for a couple more questions here. So let's change gears a little bit back to your VA experience. So you must have met with thousands of veterans and families during your time frame. What do you find is the most common type of support they need for government or charitable organizations? How can we help them more?
Ooh, well, it depends on the role. I meet with a lot right now who are really seeking support for employment, trying to figure out how to improve their resume, what skills they need. One of the things I speak currently about is upskilling, not necessarily reskilling, but upskilling. Sometimes reskilling is needed, but upskilling never hurts your portfolio. And so those are things that I encourage. I also encourage them to take a look at, places that offer resume help, because the resumes, is the key to getting your foot in the door. And especially when you're applying to federal government, you really have to pay attention to the OPM federal resume guides, and they offer classes on that. So any links you can do there. I think previously, the areas I saw primarily as chairman and at the board were really help with their claims and understanding the process, understanding how the process works and what they need to get through the process. So I am a firm believer in providing as much information as possible and helping people, to put those puzzle pieces together, because it shouldn't be as hard as it is, especially for claims and appeals. And it is, because the law makes it complicated. But anytime we can be as clear as we can, like what you need and understanding the pieces, parts of the law. So I think one of the areas, I think VA has done this well. I don't know what the board's currently doing, because, I've been a little busy over here and they have a new chairman and it's his job to set that vision. But one of the things I did was really try to be transparent on our website. And when I would speak, I would try to put the pieces, parts together and what is needed. And that's actually what I'm doing in this role, is I'm trying to put the information out there. So I talked a little bit about what my job is, and to train the hiring managers and provide hiring authority information. I'm working on something to put on our website. We're redoing our website that will provide that same information to the candidates who apply, so they know, and they know where the links are, and they know what they should be looking for. So I think anywhere we can provide the support to help veterans and their families understand the system or the situation they're in, and figure out how to connect them with the right resources. And I think you guys do that really well. If you don't provide the resources, you have the connections to support them.
Yes, thank you for saying that. And I know my peers have heard me say the story, but, I jokingly say I wouldn't have hired John Farrell either with his February 1st, 2005 resume, because you don't know what you don't know until you experience it, right? So well said. And I appreciate that you're doing that and continue to do that. My final question before I afford you to have the last word is, I want to talk about the significance of mental health and the issues that we're having throughout the military in that arena. So I know you said earlier in part of the introduction, you're an advocate for changing culture and increasing awareness surrounding mental health and suicide awareness. How important are charities in this space, and what advice would you give to someone who needs that support?
So my first advice is, if you need mental health support or you're just struggling, is call 988 and press 1 if you're a veteran. That's what the Veteran Crisis Line is there for. I can't encourage people enough to use it. I lost my father at the age of 4 years old, who was a World War II veteran, to suicide. 13 years later, I lost my brother, who at the time was 34, who's 17 years older than I was, to suicide. And he had been in the Army Reserve. He was actually at boot camp when my father died at Fort Bragg. So, for me, it's personal. And I've lost other people to suicide. 1 in 6 Americans lose people to suicide. I can't say enough that we need to share our stories. We need to share the information that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay. We all struggle at times. It is hard. The other thing we have to understand about mental health in particular is, and suicide is, when, people look at our physical health and we talk about your risk for cancer and heart attack and all those things if you have a family history of that. I happen to have a family history not only of colon cancer, so I get my colonoscopies, and I have my heart checked because I also have a heart history, but I have a 75% chance of suicide because I lost my father and brother. My sons, who never met their grandfather or uncle, have a 50% chance of suicide just because they're in the same family. Okay, those are things people need to understand and be seriously aware about and talk about in your families. How are you doing? What's your mental health? How are you? What's your resiliency? Talk to me, check in on people. I know you all do a lot of this work. I know, many of our charitable organizations, VA does this. We are really trying to move that needle. But the way to move it is to talk about it. For a long time, people were afraid to talk about it. And that's one of the things I did at the board is I trained the judges to not be afraid. Many times when we go into hearings, we are going into hearings with people with mental health issues, and that judges were sometimes afraid to have the conversations and ask some of the questions that we needed to ask because they were afraid that would bring up things that would make people upset. And actually what we know is when you ask how somebody's doing and you connect with them and you check in with them, they actually feel connected with and they feel like somebody cares.
Doubt.
And so that's the biggest thing I can say is, especially, all year long, but the holiday season is really hard on people. And so as much as you can connect with people, share your stories, just check in, how are you doing? And listen to the answer, because sometimes you'll hear more in the answer than, if you're paying attention.
So very well said, Cheryl. I will tell you, I've really seen the progression in the 18 years. When I hung up the uniform 18 years ago, many times it was, just suck it up. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it type deal. And that's unacceptable. And I know the three people on this phone know that life can be so precious. I will share at the end here that in my other life, I am a football official. And one of the guys that I've known 30 years, I went to his 22-year-old daughter's funeral yesterday because she committed suicide.
Sorry.
So, it's so heartbreaking and so sad. And we have to find a way to look at mental health a lot more than what we have. So
and our kids are, it's hard for them. It's really hard for them. I have a 23-year-old and a 27-year-old, and it's hard.
So I always like to end this interview. And the first thing I will tell you is you have the honor and privilege of being the last podcast of the year. we appreciate you doing this, especially this close to Christmas too. And I always conclude with this question. One of my biggest fans in interviews is a guy who is now almost 9 years old, but he was on the CBS Evening News. And I know you'll recognize his name, a guy named Dan Rather. And Dan has a show on Access TV called The Big Interview. And he always ends every single interview asking this question. So I'll ask you and give you last words. What question should I have asked you, Cheryl, that I didn't?
I think it was on your list and we didn't get to it. So it's the question of how being a military spouse or my connection with the military impacted my leadership, my ability to be a leader. And I will tell you, yes, I think that is the question. So the answer to that question is, I think as a military spouse, being a military spouse helped me be a better leader and helped me develop into a leader. From the early days of, interning with a POW named Hank Fowler in Nebraska at the JAG office, and I had that opportunity because I was a military spouse and could walk into the office and ask.
Sure.
And he said yes, and he's still a dear friend today, and mentor. But also serving beside my husband. And I say it's beside. He was the one that served, but I served him and the family. And, seeing, we were in Germany. I worked at the wing for a minute. And the minute that I worked there was when Secretary Brown's plane flew into the mountain. And watching everything that went on around that, the accountability, and how the leaders take the accountability, because that's where it sits. That is a huge leadership lesson. Watching the deployments, being in the hospital, being pregnant at Launchville Regional Hospital, and watching our young sons and daughters come back wounded, and visiting them because they were in a different part of the hospital and I could go visit and talk to them. Those opportunities taught me so much about being a leader. It taught me empathy. It taught me accountability. And it taught me that you have to stand, being a military spouse, you sometimes have to be resilient and pivot and stand on your own 2 feet. And because your spouse is somewhere else. And, that's part of being a military spouse, and that's who we are, but it makes us stronger and it makes us great employees. But I will tell you, I think it's leadership 101 baked right in there.
Sure is. Yeah. Well, Cheryl, thank you very much for your time today. We'll make sure that our audience gets all of your social media inputs. And of course, when we release this, we'll make sure that our media company gives it to you.
Great.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Airmen Helping Airmen Podcast. Go out and have a great Air and Space Force day. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Airmen Helping Airmen, brought to you by the Air Force Aid Society. To find out more about how we make a difference, visit afas.org. And then be sure to search for Airmen Helping in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of everyone at the Air Force Aid Society, thanks for listening, and join us on social media.